Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, welcome back to the podcast, Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife mentor. And once again, I am so glad to be here with you for this week's episode, which is another interview with an amazing woman in the middle who used yoga to help her discover her true self in midlife. My guest today is Stephannie Weikert. Stephannie is someone who went from stressed and full of self-doubt to calm and confident. She's a certified yoga therapist, and she went through a lot of self-discovery and insight in her 40s. She started to question her sexuality, quit alcohol and marijuana, and reflected on other chronic stress-related behavior throughout her life. She saw herself as struggling, but she really wanted to be more calm, balanced, and confident. She finally recognized that it was up to her to create this for herself. She needed to learn how to take charge and recognize the wisdom from her inner voice. Stephannie had to learn to listen, but listen to that inner voice. She knew she needed to. It was critical, but it was hard. It was scary, and shifting into being able to trust herself was a new skill. She shares her personal story of what it was like to hear that inner voice, but not exactly know what to do about it. How numbing with substances played a part, how wondering if sexuality can change, how that played a part and how confusing that was. She needed more clarity, how she had to face the feelings of fear and shame, how she had a great life and a great marriage, but knew she still needed to explore that inner voice, all while she felt out of alignment. Stephannie wants you to know you're not alone, no matter what is going on inside of you. You can be smart and capable and still be struggling with life's challenges, just like she was. She has quite a story to tell, all about finding her purpose and being courageous and persistent enough to do so. I know you're going to want to hear more, and I'm thrilled to welcome Stephannie to the podcast. Enjoy this interview. Hi, Stephannie. I am so glad to have you with us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Hi, Susie. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here today.
So when we met a few years ago, we were both in the early stages of figuring out how to have an online business, and I was so fascinated with the way you tied yoga practice to stress reduction. And not being into yoga myself, I thought of it more as something to help with fitness and flexibility, like I didn't really understand. But I've been watching your work now for a few years, and I'm starting to get the picture. There's a little more to it than that. But it was really your recent email that shared some of your personal work and your personal journey that made me realize how important it was to share your story of growth here on the podcast and how you overcame so many challenges using the methods that you teach with your program, Make Peace with Stress. So I just really wanted to break that down, and let's just get started with my favorite question. What was going on in your 40s that helped you get where you are today?
Yes, it's a great question. And for the record, I'm still in my 40s, although late 40s, and 48 and a half. What was going on in my 40s was a really sort of a personally shocking inner experience, which is that I started to question my sexuality. Just a little bit of background. I am still married 20 years to a man, and I have 2 teenagers. And it was I think it was the year I turned 45 that I just started noticing some things about myself that really caused me to lie in bed at night and hear within myself, am I gay? That question that, that it shocked me. It shocked me. What? No, I can't be right. But it persisted. And over the next couple of years, I really did some other growth work to be really clear about that, including getting sober from both alcohol and marijuana, which I was both using to, sort of numb and escape what was happening inside of me. And then, just sort of really was able to clarify, like, yes, this is my inner experience. This is true. And what I really want to highlight is, as you mentioned, what I teach in Make Peace with Stress is a 3-step method that I discovered 20 plus years ago without knowing that it was tied to straight from this ancient healing system that we talk about as yoga. And the briefest version of that story is that I had been struggling with chronic stress from my late teens into my late 20s, and had a lot of coping mechanisms, including drinking and smoking weed. But the thing that really was a wake-up call back 20 years ago was that I pulled on my eyebrows and eyelashes. And I now know it as a repetitive body-focused behavior. The most common one is nail biting. But I just, sort of pulled on my eyebrows and eyelashes as a nervous habit, but it was really stress fueled. It was when I was feeling anxious and overwhelmed and spiraling and spinning inside of myself that I sort of mindlessly did that, just became a habit. And at one point, I saw myself in the mirror and I had no eyebrows or eyelashes at all. And I was still sort of going through the motions of feeling around for something to yank on. And I saw myself, and it was as if I had this, sort of almost out of body experience of seeing myself, look at myself in the mirror. And I saw myself for the first time in a lot of ways that I can really even remember as a person who was just really struggling, but wanted more for myself, wanted to be, a more balanced and calm and confident person. And that I was in a lot of ways really fighting for that for myself. I had tried so many sort of external type of things. And that moment, what was super clarified to me was that it was up to me, that all of the things that I was trying to do sort of outside of myself, to get a better job, to, have a better place to live, to, get a different haircut or, different hair color, or all of those things were external experiences that weren't changing how I felt about myself inside. And that moment of seeing my face with no eyebrows or eyelashes and my eyes were just so despondent. I looked terrible. And there was an inner realization that I was the only one who could do something about it. And it was an inside job. It was really an inside job. And that's what led to sort of my focus on getting control of this weird habit, this nervous behavior of pulling on my eyebrows and eyelashes at that point, like I said, that weren't even there. And what I started doing is bending over, taking some deep breaths and saying to myself, almost like a mantra, not almost, as a mantra, you can stop. You can stop yourself. You can stop yourself. And it seems so sort of superficial and external, but what that showed me was that I had the ability to take charge of myself in a moment of, feeling anxious or overwhelmed or doubting myself or just wondering, how I was going to move forward in my life. When I did that, I showed myself that I could take charge and that I could help myself feel better. Now, full disclosure, at first it lasted, 30 seconds, but the more I did it, the more that sense of recognizing that my inner voice was really the wisdom that was there, the inner teacher, that compass for my life was in there if I just started to really listen and really trust it.
There's
right?
so much there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you can almost be grateful that the habit that you got wrapped up in was able to teach you something. Like maybe if it wasn't such a shocking wake up call for you that day, you wouldn't have really seen it. But it sounds like that was enough to kind of just give you pause. And then you also had the ability to create a pause in times of this struggle or stress.
That's right.
Which gave you the ability to really listen and trust what it was that you were thinking. So I have a feeling that you were probably like poo-pooing it away, poo-pooing the stress, poo-pooing the thoughts, poo-pooing all of it away. Is that how you would define that struggle?
Yeah, I really got into deep patterns of numbing and ignoring and, like you said, pushing it away, like just, not wanting to listen to what was happening inside of me, like not wanting to face it, not wanting to deal with it. I now know that our lives in a lot of ways are, sort of custom designed to help us overcome the exact obstacles that we need to overcome to learn the life lessons that we're meant to learn. And that resisting those on any level creates suffering. And so, it's really a part of the Make Peace with Stress philosophy that suffering is your guidepost, right? Follow the suffering because it's there to help you. That's why my program is called Make Peace with Stress, because we tend to think about stress and that inner discomfort as something that is, a shortcoming or a problem or something we need to relieve or manage or reduce. But really, it's the guide that that's something in our lives, and a lot of times it's between our ears or thinking, right? As you know, that something in our lives is out of alignment with our potential, with what we really want for ourselves.
Oh my gosh, we are so afraid of negative emotions. We are just, that's scary and uncomfortable. I'm out. Let me do this fake thing instead. Let me keep myself busy and pull my eyebrows out instead, even though we end up just creating more pain. So I love what you said about resistance, and to notice the resistance and to use the resistance as a guidepost to allow your ability to feel it without as much fear. But I'm always saying with curiosity.
Absolutely.
With curiosity. Okay. Yep. So you had this problem and you started using a mantra, and started to get reacquainted with your inner voice. Then what happened?
Well, then I discovered yoga and realized, like I said, that what I was doing, the idea of like being in your body and using your breath to shift your nervous system, which, can really just be out of whack perpetually because of our thinking. Our brain is our, sort of the central command to our nervous system. And then using, a mantra, using a practice of something, whatever, and it can be a lot of different things, but to retrain ourselves, right? So I discovered that was yoga, that was, directly from this system. And so I started practicing and studying yoga in earnest. And a couple of years later, decided to shift my entire life to study this and to become trained as a certified yoga therapist and to start teaching what I had experienced and learned. And I've been doing that now for 16, 17 years. But what I think is interesting in terms of my personal story is that same process, right? You said like noticing your inner experience and embracing it instead of resisting it. And then really welcoming that inner message and aligning with what you want for yourself, even in small ways, right? So my original mantra was stop pulling on your eyebrows and eyelashes, right? But, years and years later, when I was questioning my sexuality, it was, trust yourself. Believe yourself, right? And interestingly, we talk about resistance and suffering and struggling. Interestingly, so many of my relationships in my 40s, even in my 30s, one of the things that just really got under my skin was when I would have an idea or, share something in my relationships, like with my husband or even in my family or with friends or colleagues, and like I wasn't being listened to. That was like the thing that would always set me off. So you talk about following the struggle, the resistance, the negativity, the stress, the anger, the frustration, the thing that rubs you the wrong way. Seeing now that was leading me to noticing, to recognizing that that's not what I was doing for myself, that not listening, not trusting, not being present for myself was the thing that was I really needed to work with.
Yeah, that's so often what happens is what drives us crazy about other people is exactly what's going on with us. So absolutely. True. So you were struggling to be heard, but you were also struggling to hear yourself.
That's right. I wasn't listening to myself. And therefore, the external experience of not being heard and that really upsetting me pointed directly to, oh, well, you're not listening to yourself. You're not really giving your inner voice the respect that that it deserves.
What do you think was going on at that point that you were ignoring? Are you aware of it now? At that point, you were married at that point?
Yep. Yeah, I think I think it's easy to say, oh, I was a mother of 2 kids and I was building a business and, all the things, all the ways that we keep ourselves busy to distract ourselves, to numb ourselves, to, run from what we're hearing inside of us. So it's easy to sort of point out those external things, but I think the truth of it in terms of why I wasn't listening and to myself, to my inner voice, was really just that what I was hearing was hard and was, felt like this big scary thing to deal with, and it was. Not ultimately. At one point, it was about my sexuality, but even before that, in my earlier 40s, it was about, trusting myself and, wanting to build my life in a certain way inside, but then, it being inconvenient or hard on the outside, right? Like little things like, it is really important to me to be as environmentally friendly as possible. And so when my kids started, going to school and packing lunches and stuff, and it was really easy to buy things that were, convenience foods and that sort of thing, that are an environmental disaster. Something that I really struggled with because it was what I wanted, but yet at the same time, it was harder. It was harder to make that a priority. So like little things, and it's such a, I think, testament to how yoga is applicable, yoga philosophy, and even the practices are applicable to whatever you're dealing with. Little things like that, but then also bigger things like, questioning your sexuality or overcoming, addiction like qualities or, anything that is happening that is out of alignment in your life, that is, that you want to shift, that you want to work with, or that you don't. Right.
Right. But I think what you pinpointed is a very common question that becomes an obstacle to so many for any kind of a goal. And that thought is it's too hard.
Right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
that thought, it's too hard, and not challenging it, just being at the effect of that thought. I've seen it with myself.
Yeah.
And the example you just gave about environmentally friendly lunches is a great example. The way it comes up for me all the time is going away on the weekend and thinking, well, I can't eat the way I really want to eat because it's too hard, because it's not my own home and it's not convenient. It requires planning and maybe some discussions and this and that. So what ends up happening with that thought is we end up being out of alignment and not putting ourselves first, right? And the way I guess you interpreted that is it ended up pushing everything deeper and deeper so that you could barely even hear the message anymore.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I just read an interesting quote, I guess, about how the skills that you learn and cultivate in the first half of your life are not helpful in the second half of your life. Right. And I think, I know, here we are, sort of moving into the second half of our lives. And I think that one of the key pieces that we learn in our middle age, and I think especially as women, or that we're meant to learn, whether or not we're learning it or not. I think that the resistance and the negativity and the stress and the anger and the frustration and the discomfort really point to it, but that we're meant to learn that our experience, that our personal growth, that our desires, that, our, spirituality, all of that us as women, especially in our middle age, sort of moving towards our potential as the most important piece of our lives, really does have a positive effect on our relationships, on our work, on on the world. Ultimately, that's what we're meant to be doing as sort of seasoned, mature women. We're meant to be healing ourselves so that we add to the healing of the world. And I think that's I think that's why we get to this point in our lives where, things start to shift inside of us and we struggle with it, right? I know, the idea of regrets and regret proofing your life is a big part of your work. And I think that's key. Like, what are the areas in your life that you're not aligning yourself with what you really want for you in your life?
And why? And if the answer is because it's too hard, what does that mean? Does it mean that you're not worth the effort?
Right.
And I can't even imagine, Stephannie, what was going on in your brain when you started to realize that you could no longer deny the struggle that sounds like it was part of the problem for a long time.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you to realize it with a marriage and with kids and everything?
Yeah. I mean, so at first it was, what, like that just must be something else or, whatever. And then as that inner voice started to get louder and more persistent, speaking of hard, I really recognize, like, okay, if I'm going to look at this, and really open myself up to this inner voice, I need massive clarity. And so then I had to deal with the fact that I was numbing every day, right? Every day I was doing something to just smooth things over inside of myself, drinking and smoking pot. And so then I had to like say, okay, well, this thing is happening inside of me, and there's no way in the world that I am going to start to excavate this without being super sure. There's no way that I'm telling my husband that I'm questioning my sexuality. My husband that I love, and had a relatively happy marriage, a good life. There's no way that I'm, dropping a big old bomb on all of this unless I am crystal clear. So then I had to go through the process of letting go of all of my, devices. Maybe I shouldn't say all, but my big, devices of ignoring and distracting and the things that were, standing in the way of clarity.
Well, and even those things really don't match the lifestyle that you've been nurturing, right?
Not at all.
It's just another example of something that's just off with the woman that you wanted to become.
Out of alignment. Yeah. Exactly. And, so that you bring up an interesting point, because you're asking me, what was that experience like? And sort of facing shame was a big piece of that. And it started off of like, I feel like I have this secret of, being and, building my business and being this mentor and this, leader. And at the same time, like I would be mortified if any of my students knew that, I would smoke half a joint every night after my kids went to bed. Right.
Wow,
like I was like, that's a big, thing that I'm hiding. Or even with the drinking, I really wouldn't drink a lot alone, but I used drinking as a way to feel more comfortable in my body and in my, in situations of, being in groups and being with friends. I would overdrink. And that was another point of shame. Like I would get to this point in the evening where I just was like, I feel terrible. I'm not any more comfortable, and I'm having trouble, like, sort of functioning in this situation. And then of course the next day I would also feel terrible. So that was a point of shame that I had to start facing. And then of course, once I started letting go of those things, there was like this big sense of shame of, of hearing that inner voice and wanting, questioning everything. Like, have I always been gay? Is this something that's changed? Is this, what's this all about? And thinking about like coming out to my mother and like, oh my gosh, how horrible and terrible is that going to be? And it was really all around the shame of just not knowing all of those years what was going on, and ignoring myself and just feeling like who I am is unacceptable. It was unacceptable to me for so long.
Oh my gosh.
How can I expect, right? How can I expect?
It's so confusing. I just can't imagine how confusing it was. And even without the piece of shame, without dealing with shame, it's confusing anyway. But on the other hand, it also gives so much insight and clarity as to what was wrong. Like you just said, you weren't accepting of yourself.
That's right.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. And I feel compelled to share just because I think it's such an important message that when I started Googling in earnest things like, am I gay? I'm, 46 years old. What, is this possible? Does sexuality change? Can you suppress being gay for, 30 years? All of these questions. I really found a fairly large community. And so I feel compelled to share because that's another piece that was really challenging I felt like, and it's a common experience now that I'm, more involved in these communities of women who come out late in life, who recognize late in life, come out to themselves and to the world later in life, that it's a common experience to feel incredibly alone. You have no idea what's happening and you can't tell anybody because it just feels terrifying. And you have no idea that others experience this and that it's, not something incredibly wrong with you. That it is something that happens and that there are others out there. And so I think it's an important lesson, not just for anyone who's maybe questioning their sexuality, but also just for, all of us in general. We're not alone, right? Our inner experiences, whether they be, shame, addiction, regret, questioning everything, all that is, they're part of our universal human experience.
Absolutely.
And like I said earlier, I really believe that our lives, each of our individual lives, are custom designed for us to be able to learn those lessons. But it's a universal lesson to recognize that you're not alone. You're not alone, no matter what's going on inside of you. There is someone else feeling that way too, and
thank God for the internet.
Other people.
Yes,
I know.
yes.
I know. It's so true.
I think that's the most consistent feedback I get about the Women in the Middle podcast is that, when you think there's more out there for you, you're not alone. You're struggling with what your passion project is, you're not alone. You feel like time is running out and what's been taking you so long to figure out your purpose. You're not alone. You're bored at work when everything looks amazing on paper and you feel indulgent for even thinking that there could be more. You're not alone. You're struggling because your kids are getting older and you're not clear about your identity. You're never alone. I love that you shared that. And it's so, so true. But sitting here hearing this story, I got to tell you, I'm just overwhelmed with your courage to trust yourself and to finally look at all of it, all of the ways that you were pushing it down and that you were confused and that you were, struggling to hear that message. But on the other hand, you'd also developed this really successful program, Make Peace with Stress, which was really you working on it. You were working on it.
Yeah.
As much as you were denying it, it sounds like you knew there was a struggle and you knew that other people needed to find peace and allow stress, but like you said, to use it as a guidepost, really, right? So what would you say the biggest lesson is for you with this whole experience? Like I'm really overwhelmed with your honesty and your ability to really being honest with yourself and just really going deep to understand your purpose. What can you share that, I don't know, I know right now there's somebody listening who's also dealing with some big scary thing. What can you share?
I think that the overriding message is, you use the word purpose a couple of times, is that all of us, it's a universal life purpose to become our best selves, right? And that inner compass is there for everyone. Every single human being on the planet has a little voice inside of them that is the custom, specially tailored sort of teacher, mentor for you, and that it's your purpose in life to explore that, to grow with that, to learn to trust it, to bring that, sort of inner light, if you will, to the surface. And that even when it feels hard and scary, to reframe that for yourself, that those challenges are there on purpose for you, to help you. You mentioned something about courage. One of the other sort of defining moments for me was seeing a TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal, who is a yoga therapist, but she's also a social psychologist. And the TED Talk is How to Make Stress Your Friend, I think is what it's called. And it was so affirming to see that, because what I had realized within myself was, what we talked about, that all of that inner resistance was, there to help us. And in that TED Talk, she shared a couple of scientific studies, and I won't go deep into it, but basically that stress. And again, I want to make sure that everyone understands that stress can feel like anger, perpetual frustration, inner discomfort, resistance, the inner monologue of, this is too hard, I don't want to do this, or, that feeling of boredom at work, or that feeling of, my kids are grown up and leaving the house, and now what do I do? Oh my goodness, anything that's, oh no, on some level, that is there to help you. And again, so she shared a number of different studies that really showed that the physical stress response, when we view it as harmful, as something bad that we need to relieve or reduce, it's bad for our health and all of that, it has a negative effect on our physical and mental well-being. But when we view the stress response and all of those feelings that we've been talking about, all those hard, challenges, inner challenges as there for us, that actually it changes the way that it works in your body. And instead of fear, you feel courage, you feel excitement, you feel joy, you feel confidence, right? You literally, it's kind of hard to imagine, but you literally change how those chemicals affect your systems in your body and mind. And so the idea of making peace with stress, or, opening up to your challenges, or, embracing those inner feelings as intentional, as purposeful, has a massive effect. It's transformative. That there's no sort of other way to say it, that when you change your mind, right? And your work is all about this as well. Like there's a circumstance and then your thought about it, which creates the feelings, which has this cascade effect on your life. And so when you really work with that inner judgment of your own experience and change that, then everything in your life changes, right? Another sort of quote that I love is, nothing changes until you do, right? And it's all about that judgment, that inner judgment, and that again, our purpose, each of us as individuals, our purpose is to heal that, is to work through that. And that when you embrace it, it does get easier, because it doesn't mean that it's not hard, but it gets easier because it has such a profound effect on your life. And you see like, oh, that was really important. Why did I speaking of regret proving, why did I spend so many years fighting or running from that?
What's so interesting too, though, is that you mentioned judgment, and when we judge ourselves, we are out of the present moment. Even judgment itself pulls us away and makes it worse, because then it's just being negative on top of stress, which is negative, until you use stress for good. So what would an example be of a way that you think about stress now to make it, more peaceful, useful experience?
Yeah, well, I will just explain a very simple way to use the Make Peace with Stress method. I'll just underscore that these 3 steps are directly from this ancient healing system of yoga, but this is a way to make it really applicable to whatever you're experiencing in your life. The first step is about noticing what's going on within you, really paying attention without judgment. And that's a practice, right? It's
Totally.
An ongoing practice that's meant to be, lifelong. That doesn't change, it doesn't go away. So noticing. And then the second step is to open to that experience instead of resisting and fighting and running and numbing and all the things that we do. Opening up to it, embracing it. And the yogic practice is often translated as surrender, which can have a negative connotation, but it's really about recognizing that it's happening for you versus against you, or, that sort of thing. And then the third step is to welcome what you really want, right? So noticing your inner experience, opening to it. And your inner experience can be about sitting in traffic and being late for an appointment and having that right? It can manifest outside of yourself, but being in a stressful situation and acting in a way that just doesn't feel good, right? Doesn't feel good. So noticing that experience, opening to it, that discomfort, anger, frustration, overwhelm, self-doubt, all the things as a message from within that you can embrace, that you can start to listen to a little bit at a time. Again, whether it's the, sort of inner daily struggle of like, oh God, sink full of dishes again, or whether it's, lying in bed at night and questioning your sexuality, to use my personal example, or, what am I going to do with my life now that, all of this. And then that third step is to welcome what you really want. So back to my very original experience of this, you can stop yourself from pulling on your eyebrows and eyelashes. You can stop this little behavior, or, fast forward many years to when I was lying in bed questioning my sexuality. The welcome piece, the third step piece is I want to trust myself. I want to believe myself. I want to listen to myself. So that process of noticing, opening, and welcoming, you talked about being out of the present moment. It's the acronym for that is now, right? Because that's when you do it. You can't go back and change the past. You can't figure out something for, next week, next year, the next 10 years. You have to work with that inner experience in the moment when it's happening, when you're aligned, when you're feeling good, when you're in the flow, and truly it's, you don't need this practice, but when you're struggling inside on any level, when you don't feel inside the way you want to feel, this practice of noticing how you're feeling, what's out of alignment, embracing it, saying, okay, yes, there's something good here. There's an opportunity here. And then welcoming what it is you really want, working on that inner alignment, even in small ways in that moment, ultimately opens you up to, to the experience that you're meant to have, to aligning with what you really want for yourself.
So good. Yeah. So good. And I know one thing that you've said before that is just so simple and so important is just that nobody can do this for you. We sometimes we just want to be saved. I always think, I always look out here to the right. It's a window. And I'm like, yeah, somebody out there, whatever. It's probably just a coyote, but somebody out there can help me more than I can help myself. Right. And that's not the solution. That's not the solution.
Right.
So you know what? Thank you so much. I want to make sure that anybody who wants to find more out about the Make Peace with Stress program can absolutely do that. Just head over to www.makepeacewithstress.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate this time. And I know that there's somebody out there right now who needed to hear this message. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Susie. It's been a real pleasure.
So good, right? I love what she said about moving into the second half phase of our lives as healing ourselves and how that adds to healing the world. What can you learn about regret proofing from your life after you hear Stephannie's story? What can you learn about what you're resistant to personally and why? She talks about this idea of your universal purpose as becoming your best self. Your inner voice is your inner compass. It's unique, it's yours, and it's for you. What if your purpose in life is simply to trust that inner voice and connect with it more than you do? What about that? When you embrace and change your mind about that inner judgment of your experience, you can really begin to heal. It's there for you to help you. And by doing so, you're able to help others too. That is really something. No one can do this for you, my friend. You can get help, but you have to do it for yourself. Okay, that's it for this episode. As you know, my focus as a midlife coach is to help you waste less time spinning and feeling stuck. About aging, about empty nest, about relationships, about your career, about being more compassionate towards yourself, about all of it. It's time to get excited about your life again. And remember, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be, and I am here to help. This is what you'll learn when you hire me as your coach. Learning the mindfulness concepts are one thing, but when it comes to applying the concepts, that's when you really benefit from coaching. I can help you grow faster. You'll see the connections and insights more clearly. And we laugh a lot too because you learn to be more curious and more compassionate with yourself. And that is so good and such a beautiful gift. So, are you ready to get started? Head over to www.iamfinallyfirst.com and join my monthly coaching membership, the Finally First Club. It's your one-stop shop for all things midlife coaching, community, and connection. We are waiting for you too, so we can all grow together. For show notes and links, head over to www.coachwithsusie.com. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.